Okay, well, it's been a while. Space heater's been running. Let's see, I'm sure that this guy is off now. So let's turn that guy on. Switch him to amps. Okay. Now let's see what happens. Well, that was underwhelming. So the fridge and the AC are definitely taking a lot less power than I thought they would. That's, well, that's good. It does seem to be creeping up a little bit. That's interesting. Oh. I think the compressor may have just turned off. So for now, I'll call that a success. I have taken the battery back apart and I'm trying to balance charge the cells. It's not working all that great. I keep getting a voltage gradient between one side and the other. They're all hooked up in parallel, but if I put the charger on one side, they go up to 3.65, but then the voltage slowly drops from one side to the other. I tried charging it on the other end, and the voltage gradient went the other way. I tried charging it from the middle, and the voltage gradient went from the middle and went down as you go to the sides. So I turned the charger off completely, and I'm just letting them sit, and they're a little bit closer now, but the voltage is dropping. My understanding is that lithium iron phosphate cells will settle in voltage down to about 3.4 volts. I noticed that when I was testing them, and I wasn't sure if that was these cells, or like these cells in particular, or if it was lithium iron phosphate in general. Somebody on a forum mentioned that they do that. Like, okay, well, if that's normal behavior, great. But then how do you top balance them if they don't stay at the top? Anyway, so I'm fiddling with that. But in the meantime, I've got some hardware coming. Some of it I've collected already. So I've got some ring terminals and some snap connectors and more ring terminals for smaller gauge. So these I plan to put 10 gauge wire in. I plan to put the balance leads in, and then these guys over here, these are inline fuses, and they have 10 gauge wire coming out of them. So I plan to make inline fuses to go in between the two each pair of cells that are in series. If you have two cells in parallel, if one of them has some kind of internal short and suddenly the voltage just drops, right? It starts self-discharging or whatever, then what's going to happen is a whole bunch of current is going to go from the good cell into the bad cell, because they're going to try and self-balance, right? To keep the voltage the same. The idea is if that gets really bad, these inline fuses will pop, and then it will separate the two cells from each other. So the bad cell will still be bad, but it won't take the good cell with it. This is the final configuration of the battery, physically. I got in the mail an ISDT Q8 balance charger. I was hoping that it would have an independent balance function, from the charging and discharging, but apparently not. So that's a little disappointing. For comparison, I have my little ISDT GB8S battery checker, which will balance the cells without charging or discharging because it can't do those things. The Q8 can do like 1.5 amps, but only when it's charging and discharging. It's also able to check the series internal resistance. Because each series has two cells in parallel, it'll give me the average internal resistance of the two cells together. But if any of them are way off, I can take those apart and recheck them individually. So here's my plan. The BMS has its own balance leads, and then I'm going to hook up two more balance leads, one for the balance charger and one for playing around with other gadgets. What else? Oh, I took all the rigid bus bars off and replaced them with multi-stranded wire. I have been seeing lately that people who have batteries on mobile platforms, for example trailers, are preferring this method because when you're bouncing down the road, any vibrations or movement inside the battery will be absorbed by the multi-stranded wire instead of the terminal posts, which is what would happen if you had rigid bus bars on. Anyway, so I'm still working on cable management. So for example, some of these wires are going to be way too long and others are going to be way too short. So got to work on that. All of these wires are way too short. And because I took my nice numbered bus bars off of all of my cells, each of my series now has its own number labels, and all of my balance connections here are also numbered. Same numbering scheme that the BMS balance leads and the balance charger balance leads all use, where you start with negative and then you go 1, 2, 3, as opposed to starting with the positive most battery as 1. That's your last, your positive most cell or series is your last numbered number and not your first number. So start on the negative side and count up until you get to the end of the positive. I went ahead and bypassed the BMS because I don't want the BMS messing up this guy's charge cycle, since it's also a balance charger. I debated and this is just as precision of a device as the BMS is, so I'm really not worried about it. The other thing, I compared the BMS voltages, the voltage readings, to that of the ISDT ISDT Q8 and the ISDT 8S checker, battery checker, and they all agree within within a tolerance that's acceptable to me. I've noticed that I have it set here. I just finished charging a really short charge. It didn't really have time to get. I think these numbers, these are milliohms for each series, and they seem to change over time. I think the longer this thing charges, the more accurate those numbers will get. They're kind of all over the place, between like 1 milliohm and like 2.5 milliohms. So I think what I'm going to do, I have to take the battery apart at least one more time to get it in the box. So I think what I'm going to do is, before I do that, I'm going to separate it into two 8S1P batteries, and I'm going to charge them up with this guy and get a milliohm reading of each individual cell. I don't know what I'll do with that information. Maybe I can swap the cells around so that within reason they have similar capacities and internal resistance, or the internal resistances will average out or something. I'm not really sure. Anyway, oh, and I did find some wood in my stash in the basement, enough wood to build a box for the battery, so pretty happy about that. Okay, so to get internal resistance, I've split the battery so I can measure each individual cell. So here's the first 8 internal resistances. They definitely vary quite a bit, which is, I was kind of suspecting that. So that's what you get when you buy really cheap cells. But that also explains some of the behaviors that I'm getting from these guys. So we'll see. See if I can do anything about that. Probably not. Probably just have to make sure to keep them balanced. Anyway, so I did this set, and then I'll do this set next, and then I'll put it back together, build a box for it. Okay, I got some progress finally on the battery. I've taped up my wire harness here for all the balancing devices. I have a wooden box for the battery finally. So each series is separated by a couple sheets of paper. The sides and the bottom are lined with some EV foam. I've also got a piece of foam between the BMS and the batteries. So I got the BMS on there with double stick tape just to make sure it stays. I've got zip ties on it right now, but yeah, so came out almost perfect. A little bit narrow lengthwise. I wasn't able to get EV foam back here or below the BMS, but close enough. Well, here's the battery all put back together. Got it charging through the BMS here, getting it top balanced again, since I've got the cells all rearranged and they sat around for a while. So yeah, I think with that, the next thing to do will be to get the new fridge and air conditioner. Unfortunately, it's been a very wet year. It's already July and it's still raining. So I don't know when I'll actually get around to the trailer. But in the meantime, at least the battery is put together and ready to go. So that, I think, is about all I have for the battery part. Stay tuned for the next phase of the project, I suppose. So hope you found this interesting, and thank you very much for watching.